Design Review Board meeting of October 22nd, 2024. It says 2023 on our agenda here. That's crazy. It's 2024, and let's start with a roll call, please, John.
Board Member Diebler.
Here.
Board Member Lovell.
Here.
Board Member Bush.
Here.
Vice Chair Hanley.
Here.
And Chair Langberg.
Here.
All right, we have all 5 members in attendance. Our alternate, Marshall Balfe, is absent today.
All right, thank you, John. We have some minutes to approve, and it looks like we have everyone, the necessary members present to go through those. So we have one from last December still. That Lynn and Christine and myself were present for that. It was a preliminary review for St. Vincent de Paul project. So do the two of you have any comments, or one of you want to put forward a motion on that?
I'll motion to approve the minutes.
All right, Christina, motion to approve. Lynn?
Aye.
You want to second it first? Can you second it first? Put forward a second?
David. I second the motion.
All right. Oop. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of December 19th. We have a vote?
Board Member Diebler.
Aye.
Board Member Lovell.
Aye.
Board Member Bush. Absent. Vice Chair Hanley.
Aye.
And Chair Langberg.
Aye.
And so that motion passes with 4 ayes and 1 absent.
Okay, and then we have minutes from the August 27th meeting. I was not at that meeting, but everyone else here present was. It was a few signage projects. Would someone like to give us a motion on those minutes?
John, how do I approve minutes for items which I had to recuse myself, but not all of the items I had to recuse myself?
I would. That's a good question.
I mean, I don't think
For the
we-
minutes, they're action minutes, so I would do the vote separately. So do the vote for the minutes for this item, and then do the minutes for the second item, and then we'll take 2 separate votes.
Okay.
I think
So there was 3 items which Melissa recused herself on 6A and 6B, and
Okay.
Carrie from 6C.
okay.
So you could approve 6C, and you could approve 6A and B, or motion as such.
Right.
Carrie, you want to go first?
Sure, yeah, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve items 6A and 6B.
All right. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Thank you.
All right, so this is a motion to approve the minutes of, I'm just going to state it into the record here.
Yeah, August 27th is the date.
August 22nd,
27th.
27th, sorry, and this was for agenda item A, 7355 Healdsburg Avenue, design,
and
sign
B
review.
also.
and 7175 Healdsburg Avenue, Bank of America
That's
design
correct.
review. Okay. Board Member Diebler,
Aye.
Board Member Lovell,
Aye.
Board Member Bush,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hanley,
Abstain.
and Chair Langberg.
Absent.
Okay, so that motion still passes with 3 ayes, 1 abstention, and 1 absence.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve item 6C from the same meeting minutes.
All right. Do I have a second?
I will second that.
Thank you.
Okay, and that is to approve the meeting minutes from the same date for agenda item C, which is the Hot Monk Design Review Sign Permit. Board Member Diebler,
Aye.
Board Member Lovell,
Aye.
Board Member Bush,
Abstain.
Vice Chair Hanley,
Aye.
and Chair Langberg.
Abstain.
So that motion passes with 3 ayes and 2 abstentions.
Okay, thank you. And then one more minutes to approve from this previous September 24th. All of us were here except for Christine. Do I have a motion? This was for the Cock Robin sign and the sign ordinance discussion. Does someone like to make a motion to approve these minutes?
Sure. Yeah. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. I'll call a vote.
Board Member Dietler,
Aye.
Board Member Lovell,
Abstain.
Board Member Bush,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hanley,
Aye.
and Chair Langbert.
Aye.
So that motion passes with 4 ayes and 1 abstention.
All right. We cleared the deck of the minutes. Yeah. So as we talked about at our last meeting, I think one of our previous meetings, our agenda item 4, Planning Department update, we're going to move to the end of the meeting. And so we can now take, if there's any comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda.
So we'll go in the room first.
So we have 2 agenda items, which you can comment about later when we go over those. But if there's a period of every meeting where you can come up and give us a comment on sort of anything not on the agenda. Correct. That is. Okay. Great. And any
We do have a participant on Zoom.
on Zoom?
Yep.
Let's go there.
Linda, if you want to unmute yourself, you can go ahead.
Hi, before you start my 2 minutes, I'd like to ask a question and make a point of order. I just want to let you know that here on Zoom, I was unable to hear the first part of the meeting. I didn't hear any of the roll call. Didn't hear the call to order, and just got on during the audio. Just got on at the approval of minutes. And also, I have a question about the approval of minutes, since that's an action item. It seems to me, and I know you'll correct me, it seems to me that it ought to go out to public comment before it's voted on. So that's what I have on the point of order. So you can respond to that now, or let me go ahead and have my 2 minutes. Hello?
Yeah, Linda, go ahead and go with your 2 minutes.
Okay. So I've got some really important stuff here that I want to share with you. And that is on last Tuesday's city council meeting that I wish that you all would start attending so that you'd know what's going on in the city. But anyway, there was like in my opinion, sort of a bombshell. It was dropped by Dante Del Prete, who did an excellent presentation of the current status condition of the water and sewage infrastructure. And it was very detailed. And it was something that I had wanted to know about for a long time, because I love and I need to know how things work. And I've got a contractor's license anyway, but that's neither here nor there. But anyway, the point of the thing is the condition of the water infrastructure is grossly inadequate. It turns out that in our 37 miles of sewage pipes and all the water pipes and stuff, they were built in the 1930s with an expected lifetime of like 60 to 65 years. And well past that, they're caving in, they're crumbling, and they cannot support the current population, the traffic and the water and sewage as it is, let alone all of your projects, all the projects that have been passed and approved and are in the pipeline to be built. This is a gross, and also have been found, they found in the impact report, the environmental impact report.
30 seconds.
No significant impact on all this stuff. The impact reports are full of fraud and incorrections and stuff like this, but this is huge. I trust that you saw the article in the paper about the arsenic in the water here in Sebastopol. You may have or may, but that's not the big point. The big point is that the infrastructure here is in terrible condition. It's going to take a long time and millions of dollars, which this city does not have. And it's only going to get worse with the increased population.
2 minutes are up. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you.
So she had a point of order question I didn't quite understand about the minutes.
Yes, taking public comment on the minutes, we should open those up for public comment.
We should, in every meeting, we should open up public comment on previous meeting minutes.
If I'm reading it correctly, and I can double check, but I believe that that's the correct.
So we would do that before we go through all the minutes. Is there any public comment on the minutes we're about to?
Before you take an action on it, Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. because it is an action.
So is this the case with the city council,
I believe
planning
so.
committee? I mean, do they do this? Not as it, in the rules of order, but I've never heard of this happening. So I just want to make sure we're not just kind of adding
Yeah,
a layer of bureaucracy that we don't really need.
I will double check before.
So let's put that off till
Okay.
next time.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so item 6, any statements of conflicts of interest on the board today?
Yes, I'll have to recuse myself for the agenda item at 306 Pitt Ave. I've got a conflict of interest. Previous owners were a client of ours, and so I'll be recusing myself for that item.
All right, thank you, Gary. Anybody else? Okay, well then we'll move forward into our regular agenda, which happens to be 306 Pitt Avenue. So could we have a report from the staff on
So-
this one? Oh, go ahead.
As I go, will it be okay if you maybe shoot me a text
Are
for
you-
the following items on the
Yeah, as
agenda?
long as you're just outside of the room,
I'll be-
that's fine. If you leave just outside the building, I can come grab you.
Okay, I'll
Unless
be
you
outside the
plan
building
on-
then.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. All right. Staff report, 306 Pitt Avenue tree removal.
Just once Carrie leaves, we'll start.
Okay, so I'll be reading today's staff report. This is for 306 Pitt Avenue, item 7A. So the project applicant is seeking approval from the tree board for the removal of one Douglas fir tree at 306 Pitt Avenue. The tree is approximately 90 to 100 feet tall, and its diameter exceeds 20 inches per our code. Protected native trees measuring more than 10 inches in diameter in multifamily and commercial zones require the review and approval of the design review board. So Ben Anderson, our city arborist, reviewed the application, conducted a site visit, and prepared an arborist report dated September 5th, 2024, and it is attached in our report here. The arborist noted that it did not appear that the tree would fall through the lines if it were to fail. Also, the velvet top fungus mentioned in the application that was found near the base of the tree was discovered to be detached from any part of the tree and located near the home's foundation. No other fruiting bodies were found, and there is no evidence of an advanced infection. The arborist recommended standard pruning techniques, including a 10 to 15 feet height reduction and a branch reduction in the direction of the lean to lower the center of gravity and bring it closer to the tree's base. Staff recommends that the board review the staff report, hear from the applicant and the public, and deliberate, and then deny the removal of the trees based on the facts and findings set forth in the staff report. And with that, staff is available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie.
I do
Yeah.
want to note, unfortunately, Ben is not able to be here today. He had a previous meeting, doctor's appointment scheduled at this time. So any technical questions about the tree, I can't provide too much information.
Okay.
But I think the majority of it is laid out in his report that he's provided to the board.
Okay. All right. Any questions for staff after hearing their report from the board? I have a question. So this is a really tall tree, and clearly it's coming here for a removal request because it's leaning, right? This is the concern. Van is suggesting it's not a concern. What happens if we say it cannot be removed and then it falls down next year or in 2 years? Who's liable for that?
I believe it would be through the city arborist, as they are a contract employee with the city. So there's, insurance covers that component of it. It is a recommendation, and, Ben does put in all his reports that trees are living, and, we can only provide the best recommendation possible at the time, and can't foresee, a tree could fall down tomorrow based on a wind event. That's, that wasn't noted previously, or any type of thing. It is a living species, so at any point
Right.
it can die. But I think possibly depending on the nature of how the tree fell, is a possibility that could be investigated should that happen in the future.
So in this case, there's evidence of fungus. And he's saying it's not enough evidence, or it's not really affecting the tree. But if the fungus gets worse, let's say, and the fungus caused the tree to fall and damage his property, Ben has said, no problem, fungus is fine. Is it, so it's Ben's, the liability goes back to him
Correct,
or
yeah.
to the city?
It's,
If he's an employee of the city in this role that he's...
yeah. It's possible that it's a combination of the two, but if there is, if the tree does start to decline, the applicant can apply to go through the process again. If it's then at that time deemed to be even an immediate hazard, we can remove the tree without going through the formal process.
Mhm.
So, I guess I believe the city arborist would be the responsible party should something happen in the
Mhm.
future. If we recommend the tree for denial, and that something does happen in the future, depending on how it happens. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay.
I mean, if somebody comes out there and makes a severe saw cut in it and it falls over, then clearly that's
different.
a little different. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
So I think it depends on the situation
Mhm.
that does happen.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for staff on this item? Okay. So if is the applicant here, Michael, if you'd like to talk, come up to the podium and make sure the microphone's on there and just introduce yourself. And
Check one. There we go. Okay.
Nice.
Hi, my name is Michael Price. I am the resident and owner of the house at 306 Pitt. Me and my wife moved to the house in July, and almost as soon as we moved in, we immediately heard from neighbors who were concerned about the tree. Almost too many to count. We've been approached on the street, on our sidewalk, by people driving down the street, letting us know that they are concerned about the tree and have been concerned about the tree for a number of years. And at first, I was resistant to the idea of removing the tree. It was part of the reason that we bought the house. We enjoyed having this large tree in the property. But as I heard from neighbor after neighbor after neighbor, I began to understand their concerns. The tree, the path of the tree falls, if it were to fall at its height, it would impact a fourplex of houses directly across the street. We have some neighbors here who are present that live in those houses. I have been persuaded that we have a moral and a legal and a financial responsibility to do what we can to remove this tree before it's too late. Another arborist came out besides the arborist from the city and told us that he wouldn't be surprised if the tree was still there in 20 years, but he wouldn't be surprised if the tree blew over in the next big windstorm. That's a terrifying prospect. And we've also been told that to do sort of upkeep, maintenance on the tree, to trim it, it would be almost as expensive as removing the tree, and that's something that we would have to keep up with over time, and if we were just to remove it. So another neighbor has submitted a letter in support of our request for removal, saying that this tree has created a sense of neighborhood anxiety, and that is something that I feel living in the neighborhood, even though we've been there for a short time, and I would like to not contribute to that neighborhood anxiety and to do what I can to relieve it. So I hope you will be persuaded, as I was, that this is a tree that, as much as I like the tree, it is a dangerous tree, and we'd like to have it removed.
All right. Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions for the applicant from our board?
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah.
Are any of these neighbors arborists or licensed professionals regarding trees?
No, not as far as I know. Can I add something to my previous presentation? One, because we've only been there a short period of time, we don't have the experience of having seen the effects of a storm on this tree firsthand. We've been told by multiple neighbors that you can see it swinging pretty precariously in the wind. Again, this is not a professional opinion or a description or anything like that, but it does provoke fear in them when they see this happening. And even just seeing the tree at sort of a flat angle and seeing its lean, it's a pretty incredible lean on this tree. And I say that without a professional opinion of what is or isn't an incredible lean, but it is not a straight up tree.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other questions, Melissa?
In your application, you note that you'd like to replace it with new trees. Can you talk a little bit more about your plans?
Yes. So I'm not sure exactly specifically what trees we would do, but we would go with some natives. I'm aware Douglas fir is not a native tree. So we would probably consult with an arborist to determine what the best native replacements would be, but we would replace it with some native trees.
All right. Wayne, any questions for the applicant or anything else? Okay, thanks, Michael. So then we can open it up for public comment. And we can start with one person here and we'll go to one person on Zoom and alternate. So whoever would like to go first can come up to the podium and just tell us your name and
Hi, I'm Christine Bowman. I live 2 houses up from him on the right side. So as you're going up the street, so the tree, if it did fall, it looks like it would fall towards the duplex, but if it didn't, it would fall on the north part of my house. So I have been taking pictures of this tree since 2019. Our printer didn't really work very well, so I could send you an electronic record of that. And what I've noticed with the tree since 2019 is that it's gotten thicker. It's also leaning more, because that's what I was trying to record is this tree gradually falling over, right? And so the tree has compensated by curving up, but it still is leaning more than it should from when I noticed it in 2019. And how it's compensating is it's getting a big ball at the back of the tree so that it's anchoring itself in, because it feels the gravity pulling it also. The tree is responding. I'm a botanist. And I have had my own arborist look at that tree. And he said that although the tree is healthy,
30 seconds.
there's not enough root they don't know if the roots have been, how much their roots have been damaged, because they did actually do some road work on it. And I've lived on this street 32 years, and I'm very concerned about this tree. It is scary. And if you'd like me to send you the series of pictures that I have, I can do that. I just think it's going to be if there's an earthquake, a big earthquake.
Thank you very much. So we go to a comment on Zoom. Looks like we have 2 people.
You do, Linda. Linda, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Actually, I didn't press the buttons. I didn't intend to comment, so I didn't press the buttons. I guess maybe something happened on your end technically.
Okay. Thanks, Linda. Then we'll go to Karen.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I submitted a letter to John Jay, and I'm wondering, before I just repeat what's in the letter, if that was submitted for your review.
Yes, it's part of our package.
Yeah.
Okay. One thing that I didn't say in the letter, I had mentioned that I had also sent an arborist who also said that he thought that the tree would need to be removed for health reasons, and kind of that was probably about 8 months ago, within a year to 2 years. Like Christine said, there's a lot of concern that we have for our safety. And like I noted in the letter, the tree drops a lot of needles that are slippery. And that road, Stroud, is one of the worst roads in Sebastopol. It has so many potholes in it, and there's literally nowhere to walk on that road that is safe for the neighborhood. So I appreciate you reading the letter, and just have a lot of anxiety and concern about fire, about slipping, about potential hazard to this community.
Oops. All right. Thank you, Karen.
Sure.
So come back to the room. Would you like to make a comment? Come on up to the podium. So you have 2 minutes. You can introduce yourself.
My name is Victoria McDonald. I live in the fourplex. It's 2 duplexes that look at each other with a little driveway in between. And the tree is directly in line with falling on my house. And I bumped into Chris yesterday, and she said she was coming, and I said, I'm coming too, because I've lived in my little portion of the duplex for 16 years, and I have literally seen, and I'm going to use this microphone, the tilt of the tree coming toward me over these 16 years. And I've also seen the ball that Chris mentioned at the base of where the roots go into the soil, and it is trying to anchor itself, but it's not doing a great job. And as Michael said, there is anxiety. Every time there's a windstorm, when we were evacuated during the fires, everybody was worried. So I second all their thoughts that everybody would, I think, live a little bit easier if we knew that something was being done to correct this situation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. So is there anybody else on the Zoom screen? Yes. We've heard from Karen already.
This is her husband.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Oh, my turn.
Yeah, it's your turn.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for being there. My name is Vaughn Whalen. I live around the corner from the tree that is on the corner of Stroud, which is an abominable sort of mess, and Pitt. A couple of issues. One, public safety. If the tree and the detriment that it sheds sort of interfere with walking on the sidewalk, forcing people to walk into the street. As you know, we have an aging, graying population in this town. Many of us seniors live in this local neighborhood. And I think that public safety and well-being should be a significant concern. If this is a non-native tree, Michael said it is, I believe him, then that seems to give some impetus that, perhaps something else could be there that does not place people at risk, forcing them to walk into the street or over a cracked sidewalk. While if the tree falls, Ben may be held accountable for that. But if one of us falls and requires 911, and the city has not taken any affirmative action on behalf of its citizens, then I think that's wrong. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. I think that concludes our public comment. So we'll bring it back to the board for deliberation. Anybody want to start?
Could I? Thanks.
Question? Or, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I live, this isn't within my conflict zone, but I live in the neighborhood. I'm over on Florence and I walk by this tree often. And I would really be in support of this application. The tree is scary. I go to the other side of the street to get away from it. Not that I think it'll help me. It's so big. Also raised on a Christmas tree farm. We have over 7,000 Douglas fir. They're very shallow rooted trees. And to see one this big with this kind of angle it's freaky. And I appreciate Ben's expertise. But I think that we have a tree that's outstayed its welcome. It's much larger than anything in that neighborhood, in that specific corner. We have some really big redwoods a block away, but otherwise it's just out of scale for the neighborhood. And I'd be really supportive of a new tree just to help with that kind of character and alleviate some of the stress.
All right, thank you, Melissa. Lynn?
I kind of want to cogitate a little bit if
Okay.
others could go first.
Sure. Christine, would you have any comments, thoughts?
Well, yeah, first of all, I just want to say that I'm sorry about all this fear. Fear is a terrible thing. You can take over the mind. But the analysis that we have from the arborist and the recommendation from the city is a logical and thought out analysis. And so at this point, I feel I'm going to support the city on this. And I understand about trees too, and I just love trees. So, but that has nothing to do with this. But the way these trees grow like this is not uncommon. I have one on my property too. So it is, I can't supersede myself the analysis from the city. So.
All right. Thank you. My understanding is Douglas fir are native, but I've also heard them called native and invasive. And at least in a project I was working on, it was considered that by the state even. And they are kind of weeds in a way, and they can become a nuisance. I know that. So from looking at this tree, it does meet one of the requirements, which I think Ben doesn't agree with, but it is out of scale with the neighborhood. It may not be out of scale with redwoods down the street a little bit, but it is out of scale, I think, in where it's located. And I just think that there's enough potential problems with it. And it's very precarious that if there's a fungus, the fungus could get worse. It's in an urban setting. If this was out on a rural property, you might not care as much, but I think the potential damage and therefore the liability to the city is a major concern. So I actually think it should be removed as well, in given its condition and where it's located.
I'm going to interject here for just a second. I just Googled Douglas fir, and it says Douglas fir is native to the coastal regions of western North America from central California north through Oregon and Washington to British Columbia. So I'm going with it is a native tree.
Yeah, that's my understanding. It's a native, but it's the way it grows. It grows so, rapidly or that it can force out, native trees, other native trees that maybe are more appropriate in an area. That's kind of what I've understood about it. Lynn, cogitated enough, or anything to say?
Yeah. It's interesting. I have a tree, but very similar. Same lean, about the same height. And, but it's not near houses. I'm going to support it, your request. Yeah, I think, all things considered, and the worry in the neighborhood is somewhat convincing, and that counts. And the tree is generally just out of scale with the neighborhood. So I support the application.
All right, thank you. Any other comments, or would someone like to passion a motion?
I just want to make one more comment.
Sure,
Yeah,
please.
So while I feel from my experience in supporting the city arborist that it's not a compelling argument, but I understand the fear aspect, and and I see that the support is for the removal. So while I don't necessarily agree, find the argument completely compelling, and like I said, I'm sorry about all the fear. I really, truly am. That I would vote with the board for the removal.
Okay. Thank you, Christine. So it seems like we have a clear direction. Who would like to make a motion?
I can make a motion. I make a motion I guess I'm approving the application and rejecting the denial,
Rejecting staff's,
Yeah.
staff is recommending denial, but I don't know that we have to
do we have?
put that in a motion.
So what I would recommend is the board provide direction to staff on how the findings can be met, and
Okay.
direct staff to produce recommended findings of approval that does not need to come back to
Great.
a future meeting.
Because staff is recommending denial, they give findings for denial. We have to provide findings for approval.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
And you can base the findings for approval, from what I've heard so far. Finding number 2, that the tree is diseased or structurally unsound, and as a result is likely to become a significant hazard to life or property within 2 years, and recommends removal. And then also number 6, which the tree is matured to such an extent that is determined to be out of scale with adjacent structures and utilities, or with other landscape features.
So on the staff report, that's number 1 and number 5. On page
Correct. In the exhibit A, which is the recommended finding for denial.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, number 1, I see.
Yeah.
That's confusing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because from our ordinance, we have 1 through 5.
Correct. Yes. And the findings, it's number 1 is.
It's number 1 is
issued to
about
the
sequence, so
correct.
it's 2 through. So we should phrase it on 2 and 6. or
Correct.
2 through 6.
Yep.
Okay. Does that
Okay,
make sense?
I would like to say that I don't think that there's any evidence that the tree is unsound or unhealthy. So I think 2 is out. I think 6 is probably our talking point. And
Okay.
number 7, the neighborhood has come out and expressed a great fear. And I know that's not a denial thing, but I think I would like to include that in our motion, is that,
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's a huge factor in making this decision is the fear factor.
I mean, the public welfare is also mental health. So I think we can
Well,
put that in there. Yeah.
yeah.
I think it can get wrapped up into number 6.
Okay. All right. Help me out here, guys. But I'd like to make a motion to approve the application with a condition of approval based on number 6, that the tree has matured to an extent to be determined out of scale with adjacent structures and utilities and poses a fear factor for the neighborhood.
That works.
Close enough?
Close enough. Any comments or additions to that motion? Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Can we take a vote?
Yep. Board Member Diebler,
Aye.
Board Member Lovell,
Aye.
Vice Chair Henley,
Aye.
and Chair Langberg.
Aye.
So that motion passes with 4 ayes and 1 recusal, and that is to approve the tree removal request and direct staff to make findings for approval. So that decision does have a 7-day appeal period. So if nobody appeals that decision after, I think it's October 29th by 5 p.m., that decision will be final.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Michael and neighbors, for coming out. Okay, so we'll round up Board Member Bush to come back for our next agenda item. Sure, thank you. All right, he's back. Nice out there. Okay, Gary, welcome back. Okay, so we have our second item for today, 7B, which is listed as just full recommendation to council, but it's about the consolidation of the design review board and the planning commission, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Would you like to give us a report on that?
So I'll give you a brief one. So as you're aware, we've talked about this combination of design review and planning commission at a few meetings of yours. Recently, it was the May 28th meeting. We informed the group and wanted to seek feedback on the membership of a newly proposed group. Some of the recommendations that came forth when David was here was combined bodies would be 7 members, at least 2 members having relevant community development design expertise, whether that's an architect, landscape architect, or so forth. The meetings would still be held in person and on Zoom in some live streaming aspect, and that meetings would be scheduled monthly. After that May 28th meeting, all of you provided additional information to staff on how you felt about the combination of these groups, which included ideas on how a combined group could be beneficial for both staff and applicants, as it would streamline the process for getting development projects through the necessary requirements. You also provided input on how the combination may not be the best for the city, as it could stifle creativity that the design review board provides for projects. In addition to above, staff is recommending a final proposal to the group that breaks down the makeup of the proposed 7 members. We would like to have a discussion and action on the bulleted list items below. This allows staff to provide this recommendation to the city manager for their report to city council in early 2025. So the bullet points that are mentioned are planning commission DRB membership to be expanded to 7 members, with memberships to include at least 1 architect, 1 landscape architect, and 1 allied construction industry member. I know it's kind of a vague term, but it provides just overall somebody within the field. We would continue to have in-person and Zoom meetings, and we would continue to have 2 meetings a month at our current 6 p.m. schedule. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Also, there's any questions that I can't answer, our interim planning director is here, and throw it to the board.
All right, thank you, John. Any questions? Should we go through the normal process? We might have public comment.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So any questions for staff, I guess, before we actually have a discussion about it? Yeah, Lynn?
Yeah, could you kind of detail why you're doing this and what kind of money you're going to save by doing this?
So the main thing is to streamline the process for development review projects. Currently, right now, if a project that triggers all three review authorities, Planning Commission, City Council, Design Review Board, it goes through a process of Planning Commission first with a recommendation to City Council, and then it comes back to Design Review Board as a final approval, typically for the trees and design of the project. We have seen that that is not the most effective and efficient way for projects to go through. A lot of times, these types of things can be addressed when we get to City Council or Design Review Board at the Planning Commission meeting. So having a combination of those two boards would allow for a more streamlined process, and it would also cut down on the amount of staff time that it takes to produce two separate staff reports for those meetings, the time that we are here in those public meetings. Granted, I do understand that with two boards, it will kind of increase the overall meeting potentially length, but it's more of a way to streamline our process and also allow for city staff to work on additional projects.
Okay, I was told it was a cost saving issue and by David and necessary, but you didn't mention that. How much of a cost saving issue is it?
I don't know exactly what the numbers would be. I think it's very difficult to give you an exact number, but overall streamlining a process does inherently reduce costs because we're not having two separate meetings for the same project. We can have one meeting and get the whole project through a process rather than if we miss a date, that project is then pushed for a month or two. So it's an overall, it's hard to give you an exact cost number savings, but I think just the process overall will be an inherent cost savings.
But I think Lynn's also referring to, this came up as a specific budget reduction item, right? There's no question of that. The city's in budget trouble. Where are we going to
Correct.
save money? This was a proposal to save money.
I think we heard 18,000 was a number that this meeting, having this board meet, was like 18 grand a year. 18 and some change.
Through the
And how
chair.
much of that is offset by the applicant?
Offset, you said?
Well, if it's cost 18 grand, but the applicant's paying for is that after the applicant pays, or is
I'm
it
saying
18 grand?
Just the annual budget for the DRB to exist and pay for the tech in the room and all this stuff is a little over 18,000.
And
was
how
the
much
number.
of that is offset, that 18,000 is offset by fees paid by the applicants for the meeting?
I have no idea.
Through the chair. Hi,
Yes, please.
Jane Riley, I'm interim
Jane.
community development director. This did come up as a budget savings item. Some estimates were calculated by the former interim planning director, David Waltering. They were found to be a little high, and that's one of the reasons. We don't have development deposits for most design review applications, and so the fees only cover, paid by applicants only cover a small amount. So the estimate is not the application processing itself, but all of the other things that are associated with the design review board. Frankly, I don't think the savings are as great as $18,000. I think they're significantly less than that, The real savings is really in streamlining the application processes. And there are a number of things that have happened with state law recently, which are taking away some of that, some of local authority. I'm sure you guys have all discussed that. Your board and the Planning Commission and City Council have adopted objective design standards now. So there's kind of less of a need for design review. And frankly, when we're going through this budget processing, there's two bodies that we have to have, and that's the Planning Commission and the City Council, and the other bodies are not required. And so it's kind of our feeling, if we want to stay on the path of having a design review board and having review, a mandated review, the best way to do it is to combine it with the Planning Commission. And that keeps the strong design aspect in the Planning Commission's realm of review, because they will continue to have authority over projects, even if the budget gets so bad that there is no more design review board.
Can I ask a question about, you both have mentioned the new process, and combining the boards will create a streamlined process. What is that process? It's not included in this memo. How are we changing a project application to ensure that design doesn't get set to the side?
So the application of the project isn't changing, it's the processing of the project that would be changing. So right now, the project goes from Planning Commission, which is legislatively required to make a recommendation on it, to the City Council, who then approves it, and then it comes back to the Design Review Board, who may want changes over what the City Council just approved. And that's, pardon my almost French, a bass-backwards way of doing it, right? You guys should be seeing the project before it gets a final approval, and that's what we're trying to do.
100% agree with you on the motivation. What I don't understand is, so when the Planning Commission gets an application, who's in the room saying, that looks horrible, that doesn't fit with the neighborhood, that doesn't meet our design guidelines, don't you dare build that in Sebastopol? And where are we putting the obligation on the applicant to demonstrate compliance with our design guidelines?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So when the application first comes in, and then as it's reviewed by planning staff. Do you want to address that, John?
Yeah, so we go through, and I mean, the way that we review an application is it goes through the initial intake to make sure the application is deemed complete. And then at that point, we go through the Planning Commission's purview of a project, and then through the City Council. Currently, right now, the Planning Commission does not have the authority to make design review decisions on a project. Even though there are designers on that board, it is not within their current purview how our ordinance is written. If we were to change that with the combination of the two, at that future meeting where these two boards would be combined, we would be discussing both land use and design at the same meeting in one fail or one swoop of the brush.
And therefore, your role when that application comes in includes looking at design guidelines.
Yes, yeah. The design guidelines currently right now is I review those for the most part after when we get to before the design review board meeting. Right. So it is a longer period of time. I mean, if there's significant, I know that this is going to get denied, then I'll make that decision during the initial application phase. But overall, it is made later on in the review process. What our goal is with the combination of the two is to get ahead of that and get it done beforehand.
So the application, a developer comes to town, they want to build something in Sebastopol. The packet that they get will also include copies of our design review guidelines and a notice that you're going to have to conform with this in your initial conversation with planning department.
Correct.
So we're changing everything.
Correct.
That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah. Because if there is a combination of the two boards, we have to basically we have to remove the current ordinances that have the design review board and the planning commission, and then develop a new one that lays out what this new body is responsible for. And essentially, that's a combination of these two boards.
And so you, Jane, mentioned it's legally, it has to go to the planning commission and be ruled on by the planning commission. So was there any chance we'd encounter opposition to adding design guidelines to that meeting? Like if it's not legally now required, could an applicant say, that's too much, I don't want to look at that, I don't want to do that?
The design guidelines are already adopted by the city council.
So we can put it forward whenever we want, so to speak. Okay. So before we go on, since we're sort of discussing all this, we should just see if there's public comment, right? And then we can just
Well, I have a question.
Okay, go for it.
So we're talking about these design guidelines, but you, Jane, mentioned that we have the objective design standards. So what are the design guidelines that are planning to be used here? Because the objective design.
It would be the objective design standards that are.
Okay, when we adopted those were for only very specific types of state mandated projects. So now you're suggesting that we would just move to have that for every project that now goes before this board?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, so if they did not want to go through those objective design standards, I believe from when we had those discussions, they would go through a discretionary review. So it's either they go through the process of a discretionary review where it comes to the design or a review board, or they go through the objective design standards.
Okay,
They choose either or.
So it sounds like they were adopted as mandatory only for SB 35 projects and other projects that have a state mandate for
That's
for a
correct.
streamlined review.
But what you're saying is that anybody now, not one that would qualify for those standards in SB 35 or an SB 330, like the canopy, that anybody could come in and say, I'm choosing those objective design standards.
Correct.
But it wouldn't put them, it would still put them in front of our board.
Would
They could choose those standards, I guess, but we
Well, if
wouldn't
the
be
standards are
reviewing
only
that.
adopted for multifamily and mixed-use projects, which is what I'm assuming, then if someone came in with a subdivision, for example, a bunch of townhouses that would be subject to design review, then the code would be changed such that they're subject to planning commission review, and we have designers on the planning commission in order to help facilitate that review. Hopefully, we will have objective design standards for all types of development.
And why do you say that?
Because it helps to streamline development when you guys have already decided what kind of standards you want to apply. It's like a guidelines, except we're taking the discretion out. The state is going to continue to remove discretion from local jurisdictions.
How do you know that?
Because I've been doing this for 34 years and they've slowly been marching towards this. I work with the state legislature a lot.
It's progressive utopia.
Yeah.
And look what we have. Okay, that's the only question I had.
All right, thanks. Any other questions of staff?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what the board has been wanting for a long time, is the idea of something more objective than subjective, right? So I know there's been efforts long time ago, even before the objective design standards came along, in order to provide new guidelines that were objective. And those weren't, again, adopted because they were still subjective.
The guidelines, right.
But yeah, we've as a body have seen a number of projects come before us that don't meet objective design standards that have been adopted. We've typically had a chance to really weigh in on current design guidelines, again, being subjective. But I think this is our chance now to really see how this is all at one body going to come to play. So.
And I think a point that John made is very important. If a project comes in and it isn't complying with guidelines and standards, we're going to shoot it up for a discretionary review.
I have 2 questions for staff. Do we anticipate this combination will reduce fees for developers?
Ooh, that's a good question. I suppose it would reduce processing costs, yeah.
And Do we have a sense of the time reduction in the process by the combination?
3 months? 2 months?
Could be significant.
Yeah, I
3 months.
would say at least a few months, just because the design review board is currently meeting once a month. And planning commission is meeting twice a month. There's a possibility of, making that a little bit easier. If we approve a project, that does go to planning commission, city council, like under the current circumstance. If we approve a project that needs to come back to DRB after city council, after their second meeting of the month, we have to wait a full additional month before that project comes to the design review board. So that is an additional month and a half of waiting time for a project to come to the board where, you have somewhat limited input into the project.
Sorry, I have more than 2 questions. And will this combined board also be the tree board and the parks board as well?
I believe so.
We're just going to cover everything built in green and in between.
Yeah.
Except Arts Commission and Climate Action.
Yeah.
Okay.
Minus those 2. Yes, it would be kind of a catch-all for those 3 kind of individual.
And will this cap the number of times a project can be reviewed by this board? I think right now a project can only come to us 5 times before it just gets approved.
If it does go through a state like SB 330 or one of those Housing Accountability Act applications, yes, the maximum meeting allotment is 5. And that's any type of public meeting. So a scoping meeting, which is required for an EIR project, even though they're not technically, doing any discussion on the project or conditions of approval, that is still considered a meeting under that accountability. So that is something that gets run into quite often, where people kind of forget that that's a meeting.
The Housing Accountability Act actually applies to all projects that have 1 dwelling unit. So that as long as there's any residential component, that 5 meeting limit is going to be there, whether it's affordable or not. It's not a requirement of the Housing Accountability Act. Now that expires on December 31st of 2030, but we'll see if it gets extended.
Thank you.
Any other staff
Yeah,
questions?
I just have one thing I'd like to say for the record regarding the objective design standards. So the objective design standards were produced by a company that's produced multiple, 11 in the Marin County for sure, objective design standards. And I had the pleasure of reviewing them, and they're all the same. I mean, we tweaked around the edges, but it's all the same. So everywhere is going to be with these objective design standards. What we're agreeing to is every jurisdiction everywhere is essentially going to look the same.
Amen.
Well, I don't think that's what we're asking you to agree to today. I will agree with Optico's producing everybody's objective design standards. It's like there's one formula and then we tweak around the edges. I absolutely will not take issue with that. I think that's exactly what's happening, which is why it's important to go back to the guidelines that this body has adopted for this community and make those objective so that we're not stuck using something that's kind of off the shelf and tweaked around the edges. It's going to be really important to do that for all types of development.
Can you describe what that process would look like?
Yeah, thank you, Melissa.
Yeah, so it's taking the standards, going through and identifying the parts of the standards that are subjective and changing that language or proposing to change the language to make it more objective. So if it says the fenestration on the building will be compatible with everything else on the block, we need to say the fenestration on the building will provide vertical relief of not less than 6 inches, spaced not more than 12 feet apart, or whatever the standard on that block is. We have to be objective about what it is that we're looking for with that standard. And then we would bring those back, and you guys as the Design Review and Planning Commission would review and recommend those to the city council for adoption.
Something, Christine has alluded to this, but we're quite clear in our concern about the objective design standards becoming the design guidelines for the city of Sebastopol, and we're, I think, pretty unanimous in our concern about that. So updating our current guidelines, and I agree with you, they're a little vague around the edges. Yeah. Is that inherently part of this resolution that's going to city council and we will also update?
It is not. We would want you to make that recommendation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Right, so we have the ODS was for specifically a couple pieces of legislation, basically. And that's sitting over here. And then we have the design guidelines we've been using. Those we can work on as a city.
Yes,
to be more
that are much more
objective.
community focused and community centered. And we just need to tighten those up.
Which
And
would be
I make it sound easy, but it's not.
No, it's not. I mean, we went through the process with
Exactly.
Opticos. It wasn't easy.
Yeah.
But so this would really be either staff taking this on or hiring a consultant again.
Or a subcommittee and making recommendations to staff.
Right. Okay.
While you still have a design review board.
And we've, heard from the city that there's not a lot of interest in non-revenue generating activities. No surprise there.
But there is high interest in streamlining activities to
Okay.
make it easier and more sure or more certain for projects to come through. So I think this file falls neatly into that rubric.
Great.
Okay. One thing this is sort of a question we talked about in discussing this earlier was a preliminary design review meeting, really, or exercise before anything, so that it we have a kind of real robust design discussion before we're just ruling on something. We've had a couple projects like that have been so helpful, I think. And so I don't know how I think everybody agreed that was a good process. How do we fold that into this new format, or how do we require that in a way? Is that possible, or is that just staff saying, okay, you guys are, you applicant, we want you to come in early and tell us what you're doing?
That's a great question. That's a great process. It's one that I've used throughout my career, and I think it's so valuable. It saves everybody time and money at the end to get the applicant in and talk to them early on about what we're looking for, what we want to see.
Yeah.
If you don't have a design review board, then we have to find another way of doing that. And if that is a preliminary design meeting that's two of you and staff sitting down with the applicant, then we can do it that way. John's nodding his head yes, because I think he wants that to be happening right now.
Yeah, I mean, I try to promote that we have a preliminary review process right now. And depending on the scale of the project, I try to encourage applicants to go through that process as much as possible, but we don't have anything that requires them to go through that process. So it's kind of on them. So
does that process result in formal meeting minutes that can be attached to an application?
yes, so it would be similar to the Kathy Austin project that we reviewed 2 years ago now.
Yep.
Which will be coming back soon. But yes, so it would be a public meeting, how we've had the preliminary review right now. I think in the future, it would just be staff level, so it wouldn't be a recording. But
Other jurisdictions do that, and I found that super valuable to have formal meeting minutes that then I can staple to my application and be like, y'all have seen this, and this is what we talked about and what we agreed to.
So that the way you were describing this, so the new board is going to be called the Planning Commission, correct? The design, or I mean, it sounded that kind of sounded what you.
I don't
just
think
said.
I don't think we've.
I mean, if it's required and the DRB is not required, what do we do? Like a little, parentheses to write design review board, or? Entry board and Parks.
We're taking nominations for names. That's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, if we could put it in the name, it's going to have a different sense of,
Yeah,
I
I
would think
agree.
an applicant has a different sense of what they're coming in for.
I mean, something that includes development review or something that captures kind of everything that doesn't
Right.
specifically say, yeah, because I don't want to,
Working title
It's
planning
just-
commission. Though,
yeah.
Because that's
Yeah, that's
what
required.
statute
Yeah.
says, yeah.
We need some
Yeah.
sevenfold. Right.
But I think you're right. Just calling it planning commission doesn't really get to the point of it. I mean, there are other jurisdictions whose planning commissions include a membership that is mandated to have design professionals on it, and they don't have a design review board.
Yeah.
But no, I'm intrigued by that idea. That's a good question.
Well, this brings up a very interesting point because design professional or no, planning has a specific function and it's not design. And design is its own separate thing. So you can say, hey, I'm going to have architects on my planning commission. So what? They're going to be dealing with issues of planning.
Yeah, they're still
not-
planning commissioners.
Right. They're
Yeah.
not design review people.
Correct. I mean,
So what I see
think
what I see
architects-
happening here is this push towards these objective design standards to eliminate, to make everything the same and eliminate local control over what their city looks like.
I think we're saying the opposite of that. I think we're saying that we have some work to do in codifying the design guidelines that you guys have already worked on that are specific to this community, and getting away from using the Opticos standards that are, as you said, tweaked around the edges. But you guys are going to have to make that recommendation, because what we're here to talk about now is to tell you about this recommendation that's going to be going forward to the city council. And we want to bring them your feedback and your recommendations on that. And if your recommendation is no, we don't want to do it, then that's your recommendation. If that is your recommendation, I would at least like to hear some, but if you're going to do it anyway, here's what we would find to be really important before that's put into place.
Has this been before planning commission already?
Yes. And it goes again.
at least twice, and it's going this evening.
I mean, this memo that you've prepared.
The memo, this
Exact
memo is
same
going
memo.
tonight.
It is just tonight is the first time they're seeing this exact document. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so plenty of stuff to discuss. Any specific questions for
Should we-
now, the
should we do
planner?
public comment?
Yeah, I think we can move on and for now and just see if there's any public comment out there in the Zoom. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Oh, there is a hand up.
Linda, you should be good to go.
Okay, you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, it just reeks of another bad idea to me, the consolidation. This is not what this town needs. This town is so full of wonderfully creative, interesting people that can come up with solutions and ideas. And unfortunately, with this particular city council, Diana Rich, who tries to silence us all the time in any way she can, that we are not being heard. We are not being heard like by even you. And things are, even as it is, these various boards and stuff, we, the public, are still not being heard, or you're compartmentalized and you don't know what's going on with, say, the city council. How many of you ever attend the city council meetings? I do regularly. And I also live here on the corner of 116 and Hurlburt. And all my neighbors and I signed petitions. We're strongly opposed to the canopy project for very valid reasons. And the rest of the city, if they knew about it, they would be appalled that this thing has been approved and stuff. And this is notwithstanding the condition of the infrastructure, which I said earlier. And it's not as though Dante just figured this out. And as he's retiring, he did this great presentation about what sad inadequate infrastructure we had. He's known it all along and failed to
30
tell.
seconds.
I got more time?
Yes, Linda,
So
you got
anyway, he failed to tell. So anyway, I'm against consolidating. We need to have more. We need to have pathways for more input to better decision making. And also, you know, we don't have the infrastructure. Somebody needs to tell Gavin Newsom, you know, we cannot afford to have all of his mandated housing. We don't have the structure for it and the infrastructure
2
for it.
minutes are up.
And if
Thank
he
you.
insists, he ought to pop for it, meaning pay us to fix it. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that comment. Looks like we have no other public comments, so let's bring it back to the board for further discussion. We can certainly ask more questions of staff, but then just to be clear, staff is asking us specifically to look at these 3 bulleted items at the bottom of our memo. Is that correct, John? Yeah.
yes.
Okay. I guess we can start. If there's any more questions first, we could start with that maybe.
There seems to be a conflict in the language about the combined bodies would be 7 members with at least 2 of the members having relevant community development experience. And then at the bottom, it says that the Planning Commission expanded to 7 members with membership to include 1 architect, 1 landscape architect, and 1 allied construction industry member. So it seems like 3 members need to be.
Correct. So the first list of bullet points was what we originally came to.
I see. This is the
This is what,
iteration.
yeah, after what those discussions and then also communication with the Planning Commission. The 3 bullet points at the end is what kind of, what we came down to as a full consensus.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other specific questions to the staff for now, or we can just start discussing these items?
Well, I guess I don't know if this is a discussion or a question.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this hypothetical 7-member board, and we have this hypothetical 3 people involved in the design industry, planning industry. Who do we imagine these other 4 people will be?
Good question.
Can I ask, did anyone else have a problem with the 3 when they put in their comments? Because what I submitted to David was I thought that the majority of the board should be design professionals. Yeah, right? I mean, we're at the planning level, we're adjudicating law. And then on the
Thank
design
you,
level,
Melissa.
we're.
Thank you, Melissa. Yes, and so that's why I'm asking the question, who do we imagine in this hypothetical situation, who the other 4 members would be?
Well, I think to me what's interesting about that is the Planning Commission now has 0 requirements as to who should serve on
Well,
it.
and this is.
And
okay.
yet, how important is that? You know,
Okay.
are those decisions? Like,
I'm going to make a comment from personal experience. When we went through those objective design standards, I had really limited knowledge about planning. And I took it upon myself, untold hours, to deep dive. And I was really surprised what I learned. And I can tell you that this board even does not have the qualifications to make those objective design standards, to make a judgment on them. And because there's a lot of law baked in there. And that's why I voted no on it. Because there's a lot of law, there's law in there that you don't know about. Maybe she does, but you guys don't know about, that I snooped into. So we're going to have this board that's going to be tasked with making these major decisions in just one board, and only 3 of them are even going to people that, I mean, even in our position as design professionals and affiliated people are really not qualified. We could step up to the plate. The other thing is, so you bring in somebody that doesn't know anything, it's nice. They're willing, they're interested, but like Melissa said, we're going to be adjudicating law.
I do
This
think
is
it's
serious.
Helpful to, I'm sorry. Do you mind if I just,
Go ahead.
for just
Yeah,
really,
go ahead.
sorry. I I have the pleasure of having a front row seat to a lot of the planning commission meetings, having a partner who's involved in that. And it's delightful to have members of the community involved. And I think that we should have folks who are not design professionals to speak to community issues that sometimes
Well, do not design professionals know those
I
community
think,
issues
well,
also?
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. We've had one, comment from the public who thinks that they are. I don't think that those voices on the planning commission are as helpful in moving projects forward as those who are professionals.
No kidding. Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
trying to be polite here.
So you can understand, like I have, having spent 35 years in this profession, and I understand what the whole big picture is. I have my more specialized area, but just trying to meet building codes to get a building permit, and so you can look at I can look at planning or statements made on the design review board, and I can see then that that's never going to get a building permit. That thing that you're saying you must do, I've had this multiple times on this board where I'm going, that's not going to pass the building codes. It's not going to happen. And so it's good to have that background knowledge and know that from the beginning. I mean, this is serious business what we're planning to do here. We have a combination of, wanting to, I just saw this, somebody sent me this great meme today. It says, oh, Build Back Better. It was on a wall. Build Back Better is still waiting for their building permits, right? And so it's like, we need to expedite that process, right? But we need to understand what we're doing in the law of that process.
I mean, that's why we have staff. And I'll be honest, I'm the first guy to say that you're right. We sit on a body. It's been 10 years for me, but that's why we have staff. And there's a lot of times when I'm outside of this, off this board, and talking to staff about what these items are. And so I'm looking to staff to help me, gather
Okay,
the
but let me
information.
correct you on something. Legally, we are the superiors of staff, so we need to know this stuff. We're the body. The staff is our assistants.
Well, the staff, in particular, the planning director at the time, was very helpful in helping me understand.
I'm not saying that they're not going to be helpful, but you're the one that's making the decision.
I understand that.
And you need to understand what you're making, you hypothetically, not you personally. You need to understand what you're making a decision about. The staff is the assist. Or the board.
So again, going back to a guideline versus my own personal agenda, it's about the idea of creating less subjectivity and more objectivity. So that's when I'm presented with a staff report, I take it for staff in good faith that report is written to the knowledge that I need to understand. If I don't understand it, I ask more questions of staff.
Right,
So-
exactly. And you're a design professional and you're skilled at doing that all the time, right? That's your profession. That's what you do. You know how to work through these types of things.
So you're making an argument to have design professionals well represented on this body.
That's absolutely
Okay,
true.
great. Jane, did you have a
Yeah, I
comment?
just wanted to throw in just my personal experience because it's actually quite aligned with Christine's experience. I staffed the design review board here in Sebastopol for 8.5 years, and that happened all the time. The design review board would come up with some requirement that wasn't impossible from an engineering standpoint or was going to be completely cost prohibitive, and the poor applicant is just like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. Continue it then so I can, and it just turned into a really laborious process that went on and on. So that is an important consideration, is that we have, people who understand. And I can't ask you to be on every board and commission, unfortunately, because that is, it is a whole. We do we provide training for planning commissioners. We send the planning commissioners to seminars to try and educate them on all those nuanced points of law, but you can't know everything. And the planning commission, by design, are lay people. They're not design professionals. That's what the staff is for. And so it's a struggle always, but it's a fun struggle. And that is absolutely something that comes up. And it is so valuable to have a member of that planning commission or design review board that has that design experience and expertise that they can say, great idea, but it's not going to work, or what you're asking that applicant to do is going to set them back $40,000. That's a really important aspect. I just wanted to throw that in
Well,
there.
let me just add to that, since this is a good discussion. You've got your applicant and they're trying to do something and then they have a budget. And if they have people that they can go back and forth that understand the whole process of the building, then that's going to be understanding and helpful for them trying to make the project be a success. If you have people that just don't know, they're just not going to know. It's a blind spot. And I think that that's what's essential, especially when you start looking at having to have lots and situations and perhaps existing buildings that are going to need something creative. And that's one of my issues with the objective design standards is sometimes you got to do something creative to make it work. And it's useful actually to have the meetings, even with an applicant coming back in, if you've got design professionals that can say, hey, what about this? Because they know that. Hey, what about that?
So Christine, do you have a proposal of how many of the members? I guess first we could talk about how many members should be on this board. Because to me, I think 5 is plenty. 7 is too many. I've never been on the planning commission, but people who have been and have told me when it moved from 7 to 5, it was much better. It's streamlined. To have 7 opinions going back and forth, right? It's a 6-hour meeting suddenly or whatever,
So
right?
let me ask you this question. So 5 plus alternate or just 5 members? No alternate? I mean, how do you deal with that?
It seems, I guess with 5.
An odd number is good because you can get a vote.
Exactly. So if someone is absent, there could be an alternate to fill that spot. We just have to be clear, as you know, obviously, like that. What is the role of the alternate? Can they talk? Can they vote? Can they what? You know?
Well, okay, well, let me just say this about the alternate. I'm just going all in until you tell me to shut up. The alternate should be at all the meetings because they need to know what's going on and they should be allowed to talk and express their opinion. They just don't have a vote.
They just don't have a vote.
Unless they're in the alternate vote. And additionally, to answer your first question, I would say all design professionals and 1 person that's not. That's the way I would look at it.
Okay. Yeah. That's
When you said all the design professionals.
Affiliated in the business. So I mean, like, if you're going to call a contractor, isn't really a design professional, maybe, but that would be in my.
But like a land use attorney would be an extremely valuable person to have on the planning commission.
Yeah, for
That
sure.
would be, yeah. So affiliated, the design professional and affiliated, I think.
So that
But
could be
professional people that
Allied
understand
construction
the-
industry member is what that is meant to encompass.
the one allied construction industry member, which could be a land use attorney. Yeah.
Land use attorney, city planner,
Yeah.
not a staff. Yeah.
Not staff, but there was a suggestion by a member of the public to have a city council member on the planning commission, right? Isn't that what came in today? In that?
Yes, I believe so.
Why?
That
They're on
seems
city
unnecessary.
council.
Yeah. So maybe we can start with just getting consensus on quantity of
Quantity.
people.
Yeah, so we just, a couple of us just talked about 5 members and an alternate. Is there any other discussion on that or opinions on that? Lynn?
Can you review okay, we have 5 members and an alternate. Are we talking 3 from design review board experience, the ones that are identified here, reducing it from 7 to 3, or pardon me, from 7 to 5, and still having 3 of us move forward?
Well, I don't think, at this point, I don't think we're talking about specific people. I think we need to talk about the makeup of the
Just
board.
just
Whether
the
we were
quantity, the
here
number.
next year or not.
Well, I meant skills.
Okay, yeah. So I think, well, that's what we're discussing. To me, 5, and I think is what Christine said, I would agree, 4 of which are in this category of architects, planners, land use attorneys, et cetera, landscape architects, and 1 other member.
Civilian.
Civilian.
So for
Resident.
all land use projects that come before the planning commission, the majority of the planning commission would be design professionals. That's what you're saying.
And affiliated.
Well, more than just majority. We're talking about 4
A
out of 5.
super majority.
Super majority.
Yeah,
I think it's a whole lot easier for, let's say, an architect to become a planner than a planner to become architect. I think that's a good number that you're coming up with.
So again, we're not looking to have a board of professionals. We're looking to have a planning commission that's supposed to be laypersons in the community. So I'm just going to be frank with you, and I don't think a supermajority being design professionals on a 5-person planning commission is going to fly.
So
That can be your recommendation.
right,
I'm just
and as
being-
far as I understand it, the planning commission has, like I said earlier,
They already
zero recommendations of who should be, so they're all members of the public, so to speak. They could be no architects, no planners, none of that, as far as the
That's what it
law
is, right?
That's what it is.
That's what it is.
Okay,
right
And
now.
yet, isn't it always staffed with those people?
It always seems to be staffed with at least a couple of them, yeah.
At least a
So this
couple
would,
of them.
you would be, your recommendation would be to set a minimum. Now, four of the 5 planning commissioners would be design professionals or allied professions.
So there are no categories in the planning commission? We have categories here on the board, so.
Correct.
And that is based on, again, planning standards?
It's
planning
based
commission
on the
standards.
fact that the planning commission are intended to be lay people in the community.
Okay, let me ask
And
you
a lot
this
of-
question.
A lot of communities do have categories for them, like a
Okay.
business owner or whatever, but they,
yeah.
generally, they just have to be community members. They don't require planners.
I'll read what we have in our ordinance, and it says, "The members of the commission shall be from among residents of the city of Sebastopol, or shall be the owner of a business within the city limits of Sebastopol and a resident of one of the following school districts: Twin Hills, Sebastopol Union, and Gravenstein Union, and up to one person who is not in one of the above categories, but who is a resident of the area served by one of the following school districts: Twin Hills, Sebastopol Union, Gravenstein Union, may also be appointed. Members shall be appointed by a majority of members of the city council. A majority of the members of the planning commission shall be residents from within the city limits at all times." And that's, design review board is a little bit different because it does call out specific
Yes,
categories.
It's very different. I mean, if you imagine what the planning commission could be made up of, like I said, no design professionals. It's very different. I don't think it's a good thing. I mean, that brings up, that tries to bring in a geographical element, right? That somebody who lives outside of the center of the city limits could be part of it because they're in these school districts.
Correct, yeah. So we currently have one member of the planning commission who lives outside of city limits, but is within one of the school districts. So
Mhm.
her role on the board fits that
Yeah,
category.
right. Okay, so right now we're in this first bullet point. It sounds like our board is recommending a 5-member board with an alternate, of which four of the 5 are from a construction industry, architecture, planning background field. Is that right? Any other? Does that seem like we're all on board with that? Okay. So then continue to have in-person with Zoom and live streaming option meetings. Anybody have any comments or questions on that?
I thought that was mandated.
It's the live streaming. The live streaming is mandated only by code, so we have to go into the city code to change this anyway, so we were considering that as a cost reduction measure.
To not live stream it?
But the consensus is that we should continue to do that just because the accessibility, it's so much
Yeah.
more accessible to
Yeah,
members of
I
the
agree.
public. Yeah.
There's
That
more
keeps-
that I believe
that
that,
keeps the public aware.
People, and more people have been coming to meetings because of that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, and then continue to have 2 meetings a month and current schedule, which is actually not our current meetings or current schedule. You're referring to the planning commission.
Correct.
Oops, John.
That's what I said. I called you out. You're
I
actually
know.
calling this the planning commission moving
Totally did.
forward.
We're a little premature there, sorry.
So it
but
meets
yes.
2, it's the
Second and
second and
fourth
fourth
Tuesday
Tuesday
of the month.
at 6.
at 6 p.m. Yep.
Okay. Anybody, any comments on that? questions, concerns?
Used to be the way it was.
It used to be that way for us as well, correct? That's right.
And I think that will open up for more participation too. I mean, this is a pretty specific time with a pretty specific group of people who can participate. Your business owners, retired, masters of your own domain. But if you're employed somewhere, it'd be really hard to get off at 3:30.
6 o'clock is
Yeah.
better than 3:30. Yeah, that's
Sure.
fine. That's, yeah.
I
Okay.
think, 2 meetings a month sounds so much better than 4.5 hours.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and the point of, if for some reason an applicant or a board can't meet, that's the applicant's waiting 2 months to be in front of the DRB. That's come up as an issue.
Well, yeah, this speaks to streamlining,
Get it
right?
done
More
faster.
meetings speaks to streamlining.
Yeah.
So then I know we've only got 20-ish minutes left. It seems like the final thing we'd like to add to this as a board is a proposal to update the guidelines to meet whatever legal requirements we need to meet. I'd propose putting a timeline on that and saying we want this done
Which
soon.
guideline?
So
Well, we have our regular guidelines, our City of Sebastopol
Design
guidelines, and then
guidelines,
we have the objective design standards.
which are imperfect.
Yes, so we'd be updating
But
the.
they're in place.
We'd be updating the City of Sebastopol design guidelines, which are community-based guidelines, as I understand them, and are currently fuzzy, to meet the legal obligations of objective design guidelines. But they would be more representative of what we want as a community rather than these objective design standards that I think we can all agree are rather imperfect.
Okay, so is state now mandating that any design
No, I
guidelines have
think
to be
this
objective?
This is what Jane
No.
was suggesting, that we do that to make what we want as a design community here more objective, so that people can't contest it or.
They can't come in with a Housing Accountability Act project that might not be a multifamily or mixed-use project and say,
We're also giving staff better guidance on
Right.
what we'd be looking for as a board. So when they're doing their preliminary review and preliminary staff report, they can say it's in compliance with our
Yeah,
design
okay, so to
guidelines.
play the devil's advocate on
Yeah,
all of this is,
totally.
I mean, I just see all of this just chopping away at any type of creativity. It's just gonna be, you're gonna fit in this box. And that's what we're gonna allow you to do. And I think the result of that is people aren't gonna do.
I think if we can keep it performance-based, I mean, I've worked in jurisdictions that are not
What
as
do you mean by
prescriptive.
performance-based?
So it describes a quality and nature of things that is much more clear than I think our current design guidelines, but doesn't say, the reveal shall be 6 inches and you shall use a split face rock on 2/3 of your fascia and whatever. Honestly,
that was very well done.
yeah, thank you.
My favorite.
It's my favorite. I think that might be something we could look to kind of narrow in our design guidelines so it's much more about quality and performance of the design and less about thou shalt do shiplap on 2/3 of your thing,
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. I would like to see us opt away from that.
Totally.
The objective design standards kind of does that.
They're awful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really hard to not be prescriptive and still be objective. And that's the battle, that's the balance. And that's why I'm going to suggest you guys want to do this quickly, form a subcommittee, and a couple of you take a look at our existing guidelines and come up with more objective measures for.
Yeah, and I would imagine we're not the only community who's facing
no.
this and is not, not
no.
enjoying it. Like there
I
probably are
provide-
other
I
communities'
provide-
guidelines that would be interesting.
I run the Napa-Sonoma Housing Collaborative. I provide technical assistance to those 16 jurisdictions in Sonoma and Napa counties, and almost all of them are facing this.
Yeah.
And almost all of them went down the same path that Sebastopol went down and adopted some form of the Opticos guidelines. And the applicants don't understand it. The community doesn't understand it. There's no, it's off the shelf and, kind of choose a menu kind of thing. So I think it is really important, especially in Sebastopol, to objectify your existing guidelines rather
Right.
than relying on.
But I don't know, do you know of any communities who've come up with such an example. Like
Sure.
where, so we
My
can
firm
look.
has done multiple of them.
Okay.
But I would, seriously, you guys are the professionals here. What my firm or any other firm is going to come up with is going to be not tailored to Sebastopol. It's
Right.
going to be like, here's some examples of what we found in other communities that are small like Sebastopol. It's not the same. Small is not the same as Sebastopol, right? So I really, if two of you can spare the time to form a subcommittee and sit down and look at the existing standards and come up with some objective measures, that would be really the fastest and most tailored approach.
I like that.
Do you have any?
Wow.
Can I ask a quick question? So if this is going to go to city council sometime soon, when would this board, everything goes right, the ordinance gets rewritten, when does the new board come into being or commission?
Early 2025.
That's pretty ambiguous. We
Pretty
talking
soon,
about,
too.
like, are we thinking February or thinking May 31st?
That's mid.
I think we're talking February if
Oh, geez.
everything goes according to the direction that the city manager's office would like to go in. Yes.
So if we get a wiggle on and we were to kind of collectively approve a new set of design guidelines.
I'm feeling a sense of urgency about this. Yes.
Yes, I think we like this. Is it possible to have that as part of what the new ordinance could be? So I think it would be concerning to start this new commission without this tool in the toolkit.
But couldn't we just make a recommendation that the new board develops those guidelines?
I'm super concerned that we'll see in 2027 and we still don't have a design guideline that.
Yeah.
I-
Well,
Yeah.
So who's going to be on that subcommittee? I know that I cannot produce these guidelines by February. Like I could not find the time to do that. So if two of us can do that, great. I don't know that that's possible.
So I'm not asking that the design guidelines themselves be produced. I'm asking for a subcommittee to take a look at the existing guidelines and go through and go, oh, that's very subjective, but we could say this instead and take that first cut at it. They would eventually be adopted by the city council after review by this combined planning commission design review.
Yeah.
But when we go to the board, just had a Board of Supervisors meeting, when we go to the city council, they will be taking an action that says, okay, we're going to combine these boards. Planning department, go and change the code so that we can do that. So it's still going to be a couple of months out at the earliest before the planning department can get those codes changed. Then that has to go back because it's zoning code. It would have to go to the planning commission for review. Then they would have to recommend it to the city council, and then the city council would have first and second reading, and then it becomes effective 30 days after that. So while they're pushing for February, it's probably more like April or May.
Mm-hmm.
So can you refresh my memory as to what this extreme urgency is here to combine these boards? So it sounds like this is a done deal. We're combining the boards.
I don't think it's a done deal. It's the city council that will make a determination on this. This is the recommendation that's coming out of City Hall.
Okay, and what is the urgency to have this combined board?
It's something that we've been talking about for some time.
Sometime
and
is what exactly?
This whole year.
Wait, I'm asking a question.
The department.
What
is
department?
The planning department, city manager's department, and we've talked to the city council about it and to the planning commission and to you. And it wasn't me, it was the planning director before me, Mr. Waltering. So I'm coming a little late to the game and I
So
can't.
what is the urgency? Because I think we've moved now from the initial, what we were told was to save money. That's out the window.
No, it's
now
not
we're
out the window.
Well-
It is money saving. I'm just being honest saying.
No,
I
I'm
don't
just
think
asking a
it's-
question though. So now we've moved into streamlining.
Right.
Now, my concern, to be honest with you, is all of this stuff that I'm seeing, objective design standards and everything that the state's doing seems to me to favor Mr. Big. And that's what you're seeing with all these developments. It's Mr. Big corporate developer. And so if you're going to make these things so restrictive, then you're going to have a little guy that's going to come in that's got a building in Sebastopol that's just saying he wants to do something, and he's He can't make, he has a creative idea. What happens to him? He's just told no?
No. If there are objective standards in place and an applicant comes in and can't meet those objective standards, then they go through a discretionary process. They can choose to go through a discretionary process and come before the Planning Commission design review with an alternative.
With a bunch of people that aren't design professionals.
Well, you're saying you want four
Well,
of
yeah,
the
I
five
know,
to be
but
design
I'm just
professionals.
posing a hypothetical here.
So if
Because
only,
you said that won't fly. You
I
said
don't,
that
I don't
won't-
think it'll fly.
Yeah,
I
so,
don't
so
think it'll
you,
fly.
so you're the little guy. I'm just throwing out a hypothetical.
I
You want to
understand.
do something, you got a really creative idea, and you're going to come in and you're faced against this wall that supposedly you're being told is streamlining things, but it's really not for you, streamlining things.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is part of the one size fits all the solution that the state has had. And that is the balance that we run into in every jurisdiction, but just more so in a jurisdiction that's small and unique like Sebastopol.
So are we all hearing this?
I mean, I
Are
don't
we
know.
all hearing this?
I agree. I mean, I think there's,
Where the state's going in the direction here, does that bother anybody besides me?
I mean, yeah, I don't know what we're going to do about it.
I think so. It seemed to me what we're saying about we're trying to take the current design standards we have, not the Optico standards, and can we tailor that and make it more effective, but still make it work for us to keep Sebastopol unique as it is for all of those other projects, right?
Yeah, and I think
We'll
besides
always
it.
be the one-offs, which is what Christine's concerned about.
What I'm saying is what makes Sebastopol, what ties Sebastopol together, in my opinion, for what it's worth, is that it is unique. And people have unique ideas and they do unique things. There's no consistency here. It's not like Santa Barbara downtown or, these other towns that have these themes. We don't have a theme. We have unique individuals, and that's what people come here for, I believe. And what I see happening, in my opinion, for what it's worth, is that we're gradually chipping away at taking that away. And the mandate is, the statement is the state. The state is taking over the local jurisdiction, bit by bit by bit by bit. Is anybody paying attention to this besides me? Or are we just going to go along? Rhetorical question.
And if I can just say, I work with jurisdictions all up and down the state, and you're not alone. I would say that 70 or 80% of my jurisdictions have at least one member sitting on the body who express very similar sentiments, if not more adamant about them. So it's a real thing. It's happening. And my best advice is that you guys do everything you can to make the right way the easy way. You make your guidelines as objective as you can, and you adopt those things that make it uniquely Sebastopol. It is going to thwart the little guy who comes in with a really odd shaped lot and he can't meet any of these objective standards. The more performance based they are, the easier it's going to be for them to meet those standards. But there's always going to be a one-off. There's always going to be someone that struggles through that. So we don't want it to be just Mr. Big who can come in and develop under the objective standards.
I mean, I see these standards and guidelines as securing against bad design rather than preventing good design. It's a safety net rather than a shield.
I'd like to disagree with you, or agree with you, Melissa, but on this point, I completely disagree with you. I think I see the objective design standards in the process of the state, I'm just going to say it, is a big nod for Mr. Big developer. And what do you see all over the place? Mr. Big. And Mr. Big is owned by hedge funds. And it's just going to change the whole nature of California. And it's happening right now.
So I think a little bit on the opposite end of that. And yeah, there's some truth to that for certain, right? The people who have the money are going to pay to play. But the people who don't have the money to try to play, the idea of creating a more streamlined process for them, because I've had clients on my own sitting on the opposite end of this aisle, right? I've been in that audience presenting my projects to design review boards. Wait a minute now.
I'm all
So-
for streamline, just so you know.
Okay,
I'm
so
totally
just to
for
be
it.
clear,
It's how to
then
go about it.
That's my point, is
Yeah.
that this is about helping people who are part of this community to help them save money, to be more efficient, to be more consistent.
I'm all for
and there's
that.
no one on this body and this board here that doesn't know this town better than the public at large. So we're here to represent the public. We've said that for a long, long time. And to say that each project will conform to a Mr. Big, I have a little bit of a hard time buying that, especially when it comes for certain design review guidelines that we've consistently have looked at for a long time, and the level of consistency. I'd go so far as to even say there's no one here who could help protect the public in good site planning than this body and this board from the design guidelines that we've seen.
That's why I think we need to protect them.
So therefore, it's a great opportunity. Now, look, again, good objective standards are great to have in place because, again, it helps from bad design. We're trying to prevent that. But, it's a catch-22 in a lot of ways. If you don't put it in writing, though, then it's a loose cannon. You have to have something in writing that doesn't necessarily mean that it's always taken out of context and presented as such a bad thing. And I have been to many of council meetings, and in fact, I watch them online quite a bit, just like everyone else. That's why live streaming is great.
Totally agree.
We're all here to say that we understand and we represent. We're doing our best to represent the values of the public. And again, being here as a volunteer for a really long time, and I know all of us here have been behind this table for many of hours for a long time. It's to, again, represent those values. So yeah, that's more of a rant and less of a statement.
But just so you know, I totally agree with you, and that's why I'm just putting my foot down to make sure we don't go in the other direction. Because I see it happening, creeping.
There's also, to go back to a point I made about preliminary design review, that
idea.
These people right here are the holders of the spirit of Sebastopol, right? They're the planning staff. If someone comes in with an application that's Mr. Big and clearly doesn't fit, the planning staff has to be charged with saying, hang on, this is not what we like around here. Here's our guidelines. Here's some examples. Come back with a different vision. I mean, the CVS project went through that process in a good way for a while, and then it went off the rails. But I think we, we're hopefully we'll have a new planning director. Like they should have a vision that we're all saying here, right? So before a project comes to us, it's already gone through a vetting that's like, great, okay, we are so excited to have your project in this town.
And can I just throw in that as a part of that vetting, many communities do have an advisory body where staff is joined by an architect and a designer that they call up and say, hey, can you come in and meet with this project? Because when John sees a POS walk in the door, he knows it's not meeting the guidelines. He's going to want to get his design professionals around him and meet with the applicant. So if that is part of your recommendation, I think you should recommend that we consider that.
I think we should, and John for planning director.
I've tried. He's not going for it. I've tried. Yeah, I had brown hair before I worked for Sebastopol.
Okay.
I wonder if this subcommittee to review the design guidelines should actually include a member from the planning commission as well, since we, ultimately we'll all be one big happy family, possibly. Should this be a cross-board
I think
committee?
Sure.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
You can certainly make that recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
So recommendation to revise existing design guidelines to make them objective using a subcommittee that is comprised of a member of the existing design review board and a member of the existing planning commission, with a target to get that work done by
February.
Why not?
Hey, we all do work best with a deadline, right? Like that's what design professionals need in their world.
That's true.
And then
we
we love
learned
the
that one
noise
in
it makes
school.
as it sails past us.
But I think that Melissa also makes a statement that it's important that before we make this change, we do this process.
Right.
I think it's really
That's,
important.
I'm hearing that loud and clear. And then another recommendation that a design advisory committee, informal ad hoc, be established. That's not a Brown Act, that's staff level. We could still take minutes. I think that would be important to your point. We
Take
went and
minutes.
got this feedback and here
Yeah.
the applicant hasn't paid attention to any of it or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
Um,
I wonder if that's the chair and the vice chair of this future committee. That congratulations, you're now also
Could be.
voluntold to be this advisory group.
You might have less people throwing their hat in for those
For the chair.
nominations. but John can call you anytime and have you come and bail him out from bad design.
I mean, Lars and I have formed that occasionally. You'll get something that's a little borderline and say, like, do you think it needs to come or not? And, you know,
Right.
yeah,
right,
so
yeah. I think that makes sense. And I mean, you could leave it to a vote in a sense of each board, and you might only get one person or something, but it could be the chair and vice chair. Okay, so we've talked about how many members, the type of members, or meeting formats the same, schedule, and then this recommendation of this subcommittee and ad hoc advisory board, call it. So
Directors Advisory Committee.
Advisory committee. So the preliminary design review idea has come up, and we all like that. Does that get codified in this recommendation somehow, or is it part of that ad hoc?
Well, I was talking about it as the ad hoc, but there's still, I believe we're planning on retaining that opportunity
Oh, okay.
for someone to come forward for preliminary design review.
Mm-hmm. So it's up to the applicant.
Preliminary, we'll probably just call it preliminary review because they would
Yeah.
go to this combined.
But it's up to the applicant.
It would be up to
Correct.
the applicant.
Be
yeah.
strongly recommended from staff.
Strong, right.
It saves so much time and
Exactly,
money.
yeah,
When
so-
you
so-
have a major project,
Yeah, so again,
Even a
it kind
minor
of,
project, John for planning commission, did that with him today. It's helpful. It's helpful to go in and know what you're getting yourself into.
right, yeah.
And you have people that know.
So that's part of
Yeah.
the planning staff holds the vision, strongly recommends you do this, and then you'll have a
Or they
easier
can just tell
process.
you this is going to work or not. Because people you look at those objective design standards. I mean, how many people are going to absorb that? Whereas they could come in with something that's specific.
I don't
and
want to read it.
they're all the same though. So once you got one down, you got the whole state.
All right, so anything else can we wrap this item up, or do you need anything else from us?
2
Staff?
meetings per month, right?
Do you want a formal vote on your recommendations? I mean, I
Yes.
don't need it, but I think
Well, I
it would
think
be
that's
helpful
good.
if we said.
So we don't need a motion, but we've heard the list of recommendations, and let's go.
Would we do that? Would you read them again?
Yeah. Can you?
Yeah.
So I've got for the constitution of the committee, 5 plus an alternate, 4 of which will be design professionals or somehow involved in the allied construction industry.
Yeah.
What John said. A recommendation to revise those existing guidelines, and a subcommittee would be formed to do that, of a member of the design review board and planning commission. We're going to start early before this board's formed, so I don't think we can make it the chair and the vice chair of the new one. But the goal would be to get that done by February and ready to be considered. And a recommendation for a design advisory committee that's an ad hoc committee, not subject to Brown Act. And retention of the ability to come in for preliminary design review.
So point of clarification, if we're recommending this subcommittee and their work to be done by February, how do we set that in motion? We should do that today, or agendize it for next meeting and then form the subcommittee and get started?
Is one of you going to hang around for the planning commission meeting?
I was planning to.
Okay, good.
I will.
Okay, there you go. We'll see what they have to say.
Okay. So it's just now a recommendation for a subcommittee. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so we've heard all those. Can we call a
So
vote?
I think there was
Or-
also the addition of live streaming and also
Oh,
2 meetings
yes,
a month.
thank you. The other two,
Oh.
the last two
Yeah.
bullet points, thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
So continue with the Zoom and the live streaming, and continue, the combined design review planning commission would have 2 meetings a month.
Perfect. Okay, great. Let's take a vote.
Board Member Diegler,
Abstain.
Board Member Lovell,
Aye.
Board Member Bush,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hanley,
Aye.
and Chair Langberg.
Aye.
All right, so that motion or that recommendation passes with 4 ayes and 1 abstention.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. So we could still get a planning department update before we adjourn, at least on the status of the community development director. Go ahead.
So the update is that the position was offered, and after a consideration period, the person said no and turned it down. Fortunately, we're not in a position of starting over. We did have an additional application that came in during the application period, so that person will be interviewed soon. And then there will be a decision made between that person and the number 2 candidate from the first go round.
So the number 2 candidate, you couldn't just offer it to number 2?
The decision was made to go ahead and interview this second person who is local and with a very strong background in economic development activity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
So if number 2 gets it, and they're gonna
It may
know.
still go to number 2.
Right. Okay. Any other updates you want to fill us in on?
So development project wise, the Canopy has submitted their building permit applications. Those are under review right now. The Woodmark project was finalized at the beginning of October, and they are now accepting applications for occupancy of those 48 units. The Hotel Sebastopol, there's no kind of new update with the Hotel Sebastopol. The Barlow Hotel is still going through their CEQA items, and
Barlow Hotel is tentatively scheduled to come to the planning commission in a joint planning commission design review board meeting. So whether it's done by then or not, they're tentatively scheduled to go in January. Moving along.
A joint?
Yes,
Yeah.
joint meeting.
It'll be a first for me.
We've done them before, haven't we? I thought they'd been done before. I'm sorry. Sorry,
I
Lynn.
don't think I've been part of that. Okay, great.
we have 2 kind of grant projects going. So tonight at the Planning Commission, right after here, we'll have the milestone number 3 update from the active transportation plan. That will be the last Planning Commission update for them. They will be going to the City Council on November 19th as still within the draft period for the City Council to provide final comments, and then that will come back to them before February for final adoption of that plan. We also have right after that the kind of first update of the Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Grant to the Planning Commission. So just giving a small update. They've had a couple of stakeholder meetings, and then we'll also be announcing a upcoming open house for that project in middle of November.
Great.
And then Huntley Square has also, I know that they've submitted their site work permits. I don't believe they've submitted their building permit applications yet, but I haven't seen it come across my
What
review.
was that?
Huntley Square, which is about 2 blocks down from Woodmark on Bodega Avenue.
It was
It's kind of
a-
across the street from the cemetery.
Yeah, but it was a 10 unit
Yeah.
project we
10-unit
approved,
townhomes.
yeah, a while ago. Great. All right. Thanks, John.
What's going on with the Cock Robin signage?
Oh, yes. I was going to ask about that.
They have taken some of the signage down. They did submit an appeal to the city. So that will be at an upcoming city council meeting to appeal the decision of the design review board. We have reached out to them to take down the signage that is out of compliance.
So they have to take it down while waiting for the decision on the appeal?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Just the sign that's next to the bunny tree,
Mhm.
it's, about 10 feet tall. I don't think that conforms to any of our guidelines.
It does not.
And it wasn't even in
It
their
wasn't
application.
included. Yeah, it wasn't included as part of the application that you guys reviewed.
Yeah.
So it's going.
Yeah.
Gotta go.
All right. All right. If that's it, we can adjourn. Thanks, everyone. Gavel.
Recording stopped.